should introduce myself. My name is Timothy James. I'm an engineering manager. I was once a student right here, and I've probably attended similar talks in the William Pitt Union here at the University of Pittsburgh. I graduated more than 20 years ago. I have been in tech for all of those 20 years, plus a few extra before I graduated. And I've learned a couple of things about the job-seeking process, the recruiting process, the networking process. I've probably done 1,000 interviews in my life. I've probably hired somewhere in the ballpark of 100 people over my career so far. So I got a couple of things I can say and a couple of things I can share about this. I've also sought out a lot of jobs. I have had probably 30-something different employers pay my paycheck, including the University of Pittsburgh here. So I have learned a little bit about finding jobs. I've learned a little bit about representing myself. I've learned a little bit about the interview process, because when you have that many employers, you have to go on a lot of interviews. And I've had a lot of interviews I've gone on where I did not get the job, including my current employer, though they did come back around a year later and we did work it out. So let's go ahead and jump in. So one thing to note, if you want to find this presentation, it's available at gr1.me/li. It's out there. You can take a look at it. It's the wonderful thing about things being online. They are accessible easily. And if you want to write that down, you can. If you don't, that's fine too. One thing I will say, and I think it probably doesn't matter too much to this audience, but a lot of this advice is focused on college students. It's focused on people who have recently graduated. It's focused on early career job seekers. A lot of it is probably targeted a little bit more to tech, but not exclusively. So if you're outside of this scope, you might find something useful here. Hopefully it will be useful to a broader audience, as the slide says. So the number one thing I can tell you about LinkedIn is if you are here today and you are in this talk and you have not yet created a LinkedIn profile, this is the number one tip. Go create a LinkedIn profile. That's number one. So we start here. My guess is most of you have created a LinkedIn profile, but this has kind of become the de facto social network for professionals and job seeking. And in fact, I used to have a bunch of job site recommendations that I would give out. Now I would say that LinkedIn is probably first and foremost on my list. It's probably recommendation 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and number 6 is way further down. So, couple of first steps on your profile. A lot of this is going to be obvious, but you should make sure that you do all of these things. Number one is include your name. Some people like to put weird stuff in this particular spot. A lot of people like to put their name and then comma 7 qualifications that probably nobody really cares about. So I see a lot of times someone has their name and then 7 sets of 3 or 4 letters, and just put your name. I think that's a reasonable way to approach this. But you want to use a strong headline, something that speaks to recruiters. I think a lot of this effort is about trying to put yourself in the shoes of recruiters. Think about something from somebody else's perspective. Using a strong headline is a little bit more gripping. If you think about what somebody is doing in this situation, they're probably looking at dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of profiles. So how are you going to stand out amongst all of those other ones? It's really important to use something that is going to be catching. Now, a lot of people see the headline in LinkedIn and they're like, well, I have to put down my current job title. What's your current job title? Student, there you go. So do you want to put student? Is that engaging? Is that exciting? I mean, you are a student, and that's not a bad thing to be, but that's not the only thing you are. So think about that when you're choosing a headline. The places you've worked, internships. If you haven't had a lot of internships or you haven't had a lot of industry relevant experience, it's okay to put non-industry relevant experience, because what that will say is that you are employable. And that is a really important thing to be able to identify. Include any education you have. This can also be certifications, it can be online courses, it can be other educational work that you've done that's not necessarily university oriented, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. The last item, a lot of people, they have an email address that is something super embarrassing that they got when they were 13 years old or 12 years old or 11 years old. And if it's something really weird, just change it to your name. There's 19 email services out there. Just get something that sounds like it is professional. It doesn't have to necessarily be your name, but if I am looking at a LinkedIn profile and I click on contact info and it's some of these are actually pretty aggressively vulgar, so make sure that you're using something that is readable by someone who might hire you. Think of it if I'm applying to a bank, is this going to be okay? Is a good way to think about it. All right. Next steps. One thing that is really nice in LinkedIn is that you can list multiple roles for a single job. So again, a lot of things you put on your resume, a lot of things you might put on your LinkedIn profile are gonna, you're gonna think like, well, this isn't the job title I had, this isn't exactly the role I had. It doesn't matter that much. I was once a product manager at Thomson Reuters, and I did not put that exact title on my resume because what I did was not really that job. So it's okay to match what you're doing on LinkedIn, or match what you're doing to your LinkedIn title a little bit more effectively. It doesn't have to be exactly this, and people, they might call employers to verify employment in the final stages of an interview process, but they're probably not going to call up an employer the first thing and say, did this person have exactly this title from exactly these dates? That's not how these things typically are verified. So it's okay to be a little bit more descriptive here. Side projects and other efforts can be super helpful in your LinkedIn profile. One thing that people don't do a lot of is including their volunteer experience. This is huge. Volunteer experience has a lot of value in the interview process. One, it's a great way to earn experience. Two, it's a great way to show that you care about things that are not necessarily your job. Three, it just shows that, like, yeah, you know what, you're a little bit more, like, I want to do something good, and I think that engagement can be very helpful. Skills are useful, and there is an upper bound on the number of skills you can put in LinkedIn. I found this because I used to play this game. I called it the LinkedIn endorsement game, skill endorsement game, and the idea was that you generate a couple of letters and then you pick a skill from LinkedIn, and they have all sorts of weird skills on LinkedIn. There's like animal husbandry is one, sword fighting I think is another. So we played this game for a while, and if you look at my profile, I probably have like 5 or 6 endorsements that are for weird things like that. I think I have animal husbandry. Somebody's endorsed me for that skill. I don't know, but add skills, and you might as well fill it up, especially if you're early career. One of the most important things you can do early in your career is say that you're capable of doing things. And the reason for that is because when you're early in your career, nobody expects you to be an expert on them. If you say, I've been writing Java code for 20 years, people are going to have expectations. But if you say, I've been writing Java code, and by the way, I'm 20 years old, nobody expects you to be an expert in that particular topic. So I always recommend, if you've touched it, if you've done enough that you can learn a decent amount of it in a weekend, you might as well put it down. So you want that skills section to be pretty filled. The way I always present this is, if it's something that you got a call for an interview for your dream job, and you had to figure out how to interview for this dream job in a week, would you be able to learn it? And I think to learn something at what they would expect at that level in a week is probably pretty manageable, especially if it's something you really wanted. So skills are really important in this section. The other thing is, make it as public as you can. A lot of people are not super comfortable with the public settings in LinkedIn, and that's fine. You don't have to make it completely public, but make it as public as you're comfortable with, because that way you're going to be discoverable. And most of the time when you're on LinkedIn, what you want is for people to discover you. So if there's a bunch of open to options here, so you can identify if you're interested in being hired, or if you're open to work or anything like that, that can be really useful. You want to add other sections as necessary to your profile, these add sections. So try to get something in for every section. Again, a complete profile is going to be more attractive, it's going to be more discoverable. And you can adjust your privacy settings. It's linkedin.com/psettings.